Flutter is known for its extensible built-in navigation. Even by using the default Navigator, you have a couple of options. You can instantiate the so-called page widgets directly and use something like material page route. Then you can also use simple mapped named routes, or you can also set up more elaborate named routes with the ability to pass in custom arguments. And you can learn about all of these default navigation methods from the tutorial from the card in the corner. Sometimes though, it's just good to bring more structure into navigation. Instead of inventing ways of how to safely pass values between routes, you can use parameters and arguments in Sailor. Instead of reinventing the wheel with custom route transitions, you can use the ones which Sailor provides and let the Sailor library do the heavy lifting for you. Hello, welcome to ResoCoder, where you are getting prepared for real app development by building better, faster, more stable apps. So subscribe and hit the bell if you want to grow your coding skills. Also, if you do not know already, an amazing Flutter conference is going to be taking place in January the next year, 2020, in Warsaw, Poland. So people from Google will be there, I will be there, and it's going to be packed with great presentations and a lot of fun. So if you want to meet up with the Flutter community and you want to go to this Flutter Europe conference, check out the link from the description to learn more. This tutorial will be all about the Sailor library, and by the end of it, we will have an app which can navigate to the second page and also to the third page from the first page. And as you can see, the route transition to and from the third page looks kinda cool. I wouldn't recommend doing this in your real apps, but this is what we are gonna be building in this tutorial. All of this navigation will happen with Sailor, and the values which you can see on the routes over here, so laptop 2nd gen and its price 2000, are all passed to these routes from the first route. And the way that these values are passed are different in the second route and in the third route. So there is really a lot to learn here. And you're going to learn about how to pass those values in, how to set up Sailor, how to navigate using Sailor, and also, as you can see, you're going to learn about how to create these custom nice transitions for your routes. And because I do not want to bore you with creating the basic layout, we already have a starter project prepared, which contains initial page, second page, and third page. Currently, the starter project contains just a simple navigation from the initial page to the other pages using the default navigator of push, material page route, and so on. And if you want to follow along with this tutorial and get the starter project, be sure to check out the written tutorial from the link in the description, where apart from the starter project, you can also find all of the code written in this video, links to the libraries, and overall go through this lesson at your own pace. Now, without any further ado, let's get right to it. The starter project's pubspec.yaml file already contains the Sailor package imported. Make sure that if you are following along with this tutorial, you have the same version. For now, that's 0.5.0. That's because in the future releases of Sailor, some things might be different, so just make sure that we are on the same page. Just so you know, the second page takes in its parameters separately. So we have the second page constructor, and this takes in product name and price as two fields. And the third page takes in basically the same data, but it takes it inside third page args class. So we've created an intermediary class third page args, and only that is passed into the third page. Otherwise, the data is the same. So what is the first step which we should take in order to make the Sailor package work and do the heavy lifting of using named routes and all of that for us? Well, we first need to add routes to Sailor. We're going to do so inside main.dart. And to follow the first solid principle, which is the single responsibility principle, we are going to put everything related to our routes into a separate routes class. So let's do just that. To add routes to Sailor, we first need to somehow get hold of the Sailor instance. We're actually going to put it inside a static final Sailor, which is going to be inside this routes class, and let's just simply instantiate Sailor. So let's import package Sailor, and now we're good to go. We're going to use this Sailor instance, which is made static inside the routes class, throughout our whole app whenever we need to navigate with Sailor. Also, we want to somehow add these 3 routes to the Sailor so that it knows what to do whenever it gets some navigation event, let's call it like that. We're going to set it all up inside a static void create routes, which we'll call Sailor. And now we have 2 options. We can either add a single route or add multiple routes. Since we want to add 3 routes, we're going to call add routes, which takes in a list of Sailor route. And each Sailor route can have a name, which in the first routes case will be initial. And then a very important part is the builder. This builder will be the thing which returns the actual widget, in this case the initial page. And a builder, as you can see, takes in build context, base arguments, and param map. So you know what build context is, but arguments and params, we're going to get to them later as soon as we start playing with passing values into the routes. But first, let's just set everything up. So this builder takes in context, then let's call those argument args and params. It's a regular method which needs to return a widget. So let's just return initial page. And with that, the first Sailor route is now set up. So let's duplicate it, or actually triplicate it. So we want to have also a second route, which will return second page. Let's import that. And then we finally want to have third route, which will return third page. Apart from having these errors and warnings, because the second page should take in 2 required parameters, product name and price, and the third page must take in the third page args argument. Apart from this, we have other pressing issues to take care of, because currently we are not calling this create routes method anywhere. So it wouldn't run, therefore these routes would not even be added to Sailor. And also we need to do some Sailor specific setup so that it can plug into the default Flutter's navigation system. Also, I would recommend you in your own projects that you do not use these magical strings, but instead create constant strings and put them in here, because just passing around magical strings is no good. But for the sake of the simplicity of this tutorial, we are going to leave these string literals in here. So now, from where are we going to call create routes? An obvious choice is the main method. So let's convert it to a block body, and right before calling run app, which will instantiate our first widget and so on, we want to call routes dot create routes. So this will add all of our defined routes to Sailor. And now, how are we going to plug Sailor in to the default navigation system of Flutter? Well, we need to modify some fields on the material app. Namely, those fields are going to be on generate route function. This is something which you would also modify if you were implementing the navigation yourself, but we are not going to implement it ourselves. We're going to let Sailor do all of the heavy lifting for us. So even for Sailor, we need to define on generate route, and we want to specify routes because that's where our Sailor instance lives, .sailor. So that's our only Sailor instance in our app. And then we want to call generate, or generator actually. And if we take a look at the generator just for fun, we can see that it tries to map the route name to the route which should be returned. And overall, there's quite a lot of code in here, so I'm definitely happy that we do not have to write all of this. Then also we want to specify navigator key to be also from routes.sailor.navigator key. What this will allow us to do is to actually not use the build context at all while navigating. Currently, we need to use the build context, for example, here from the initial page as we are navigating to the second page. We need to provide the context. Something like that would also be needed for Sailor, but because we have specified this navigator key over here, we will no longer need to pass around build context, which definitely saves quite a few of keystrokes, so that's awesome. Once we have Sailor set up, let's deal with these missing values for the second page and third page. That means we're going to pass in values. And Sailor gives us two options in how to pass those values. Firstly, we can use parameters, or we can also use arguments. To be frank, the naming may not be the best because arguments and parameters are basically the same thing when it comes to programming. You pass in arguments into a function. So for example, if I were to call void f int x, right? Whenever I call f and I pass in 1, 2, 3, this is an argument. 1, 2, 3 is an argument because I'm passing it into a function. However, whenever I use that inside the function, so x, this is now called a parameter. Whenever I use the value inside that particular function, x is a parameter, 1, 2, 3 is an argument. However, Sailor differentiates between these two names in somewhat an interesting way, because parameters in Sailor are represented by a map containing multiple values, and arguments are represented by a class. And that means that parameters are perfect to showcase with the second page, which takes in each and every field separately, and arguments are going to be perfectly showcased with the third page, which takes in a third page args. Before we can use parameters and pass them into this builder method, we need to define the possible parameters which can be passed into the second route. We can do that by specifying params for the Sailor route, which should take them. And this is going to be a list of Sailor param. And every Sailor param has to have a name, which will be product name. And then we can also specify whether or not it's required and also its default value. For product name, let's specify is required to be true. And then another Sailor param will be with name, price. And let's just set this one's default value to be 100.0. Why 0.0? Well, if we take a look at the second page, we can see that the price is of type double. And using parameters instead of arguments, to which we are going to get in just a little while, means that although we gain in maybe simplicity, that we do not have to have an intermediary class defined, we can just pass those parameters right into the second page's constructor without using some arguments class. At the same time, we lose out on type safety. if we were to define the default value for the price parameter to be only 100, it would be of type integer, and then we would get type errors whenever the integer would try to be cast into a double. So that's why you need to set your types just right when you are using params. These problems go away as soon as you move over to arguments instead of params. So that's why I would recommend you to use arguments and not this monstrosity. But params are also what's possible to do with Sailor, so that's why I'm showing it to you. Now, whenever we are going to navigate to the second route, we can pass in these params over to Sailor, and those params will arrive inside this builder function. So now we can use them and pass them in to the second page. We are going to define the product name to come from params. And now params is a special kind of a map, a param map, as you can see. And we can get individual params out of this by calling param and then specifying its key. So this one will be product name. And we also want to specify price. So params dot param. And this is actually a generic method. So we can either let the Dart compiler infer the type for us, like here, product name will be inferred to be a string, or we can specify the type ourselves. So this should be a double. We can also specify it like this, double. This will take the care of the casting for us, and we can specify the key to be price. So that's enough for params. Let's now move to arguments, which are, in my opinion, the much better option when it comes to passing around values in between routes. That's because you get absolute type safety. You get to compartmentalize your arguments into nice classes, which is definitely a good thing. And also, there is much less setup to do, because here we had to define all of these params. Basically, we have to duplicate the name of the field because we have to name the field inside the class, right? Product name goes here. Then the same name has to go to the name of the Sailor param. So there is just a lot of duplication. And also we lose out on the type safety, which Dart provides. If we want to use arguments instead, all we have to do is to just extend the arguments class with base arguments, which come from Sailor. And once we have that, we can now pass these arguments, this object, into Sailor, as we are going to be navigating in just a bit from the initial page. And now all we have to do is to pass args, which come into the builder, to the third page. Args are of type base arguments, and they are going to be automatically cast into the type of third page args. And also, you do not have to access these arguments and parameters directly from the builder method like we are currently doing. You can also access them from the actual widgets. So for example, here, right inside the build method, inside the second page, you are able to access parameters, and you are also able to access arguments from the build method of the third page. However, I think that it's best to always access and pass those parameters and arguments directly inside the builders of Sailor routes. However, if you really want to learn how to access args and params from the widgets directly, check out the official docs, and a link to them is in the written tutorial. Now we are going to finally navigate to these two routes, the second and the third route, from the initial page. So as you could see already, we are currently navigating using the default way of navigating, which is material page routes, and we are pushing routes around using the Navigator. Now we are going to switch to Sailor. So instead of calling Navigator of context push, we are going to call routes dot Sailor of course, we need to import main.dart where the routes class is defined. And now all we have to do is to call navigate, and we are going to pass in the name of the route to which we want to navigate, so second, and then this second route takes in params, and we have to specify them right over here as we are navigating. So params will be a map of string dynamic. So that's also why I do not recommend you to use params, because it's just very easy to get lost in the maps of string dynamic, whereas you really cannot get lost when you are using a nice class like this third page arcs. But anyway, we are now going to specify that we want to pass in price with the value of 2000. And also you have to make sure that you add that decimal place, because otherwise it would be deemed to be an integer and you would get a typecast error as you would try to cast it into a double. So again, params are not type safe, so make sure that you keep that in mind. Then the next parameter we want to pass in is the product name. Let's say that this should be laptop second gen. Or actually second should be 2ND, just to keep it consistent with what we had here previously. So this is how we can navigate to the second route. So how can we navigate to the third route with arguments? Well, that's even simpler. Let's just copy this, paste it into navigate to third method. Instead of second, we're going to navigate to third. And instead of params, we're going to pass in arguments, which are going to be third page arcs. And now we do not have to worry about type safety, about all of that, because we can just specify the price to be 3000. And we do not even have to add the decimal place, because now Flutter or Dart will automatically infer that this should be a double. So we are not going to get any typecast errors here. And then we'll specify product name to be laptop third gen. With this, we can now test out if everything works as we would expect. So let's launch this app inside the emulator. And here we go. We can now go to the second page and also to the third page. And I can also show you why we need to make sure that the price is actually 2000.0. Because if we make it 2000 and I save this, and now we're going to try to go over to the second page. So let's go back and go to second. We're going to get a typecast error because type integer is not a subtype of type double in typecast. And that's definitely true. So that's why you need to really be wary of your types when you are using params and not arcs. There is just one more thing which is really awesome about Sailor, and that is that in addition to providing a really simple way to navigate using named routes, it also simplifies adding route transition animations. And as you could see in the example app, we're going to build something really crazy looking for the third page navigation, because currently it's just default material navigation route transition. We're going to build something really special. You can either define transitions when you are navigating. So you can see here we have transitions. So we can define transitions right over here as we are navigating. Then you can also define global transitions for every single route that there is added to Sailor. And you can also define default transitions for certain routes. We're going to go with the third option. So we're going to define the default transition for the route, Sailor route itself. If you want to learn more about defining transitions as you are navigating or defining global transitions, all of the links to the official documentation are available from the written tutorial, to which you can get from the link in the description. So we want to define default transitions for the third route. And this takes in a list of Sailor transition. And you can also define your own custom transition. Again, that's in the docs, but Sailor comes with a bunch of nice predefined transitions which we can use. So let's specify Sailor transition. And now we can choose even multiple ones. So we can go with slide from bottom. If we left it at just that, and we would take a look at how the app looks like, of course we need to hot restart the app, not just reload, because this create routes is called from main, which is not reloaded. So we need to restart the app. So make sure you do that. And now when we go to third page, it's basically gonna look very much the same as it did before, but now we do not even get that fade transition. We just get it pulled from the bottom. So we definitely want to have something more exotic than that. So let's again specify another transition, and let's now say slide from left. All right, so let's again hot restart. Now it's gonna look something like this. So it goes diagonally. But we also want to have it a bit more exotic than that. So let's say Sailor transition dot zoom in. And now it's gonna look like something which I would not recommend you to do in your real projects, because like looking at this transition, it really makes my eyes cry after I hot restart. So it's just too much in my opinion, especially when we change the curve and duration of the transition. So we can also say default transition curve, and let's just set it to be something really crazy like curves dot elastic, or maybe ease in, and let's make it crazy, ease in circ. And let's also specify the default transition duration, and let's set it to be just too long. So seconds 2, that's just too long for a transition. But anyway, if we now take a look at how it looks like, it's a very long-winded transition and it looks completely crazy. So awesome. Going to the second page still works as expected. And also, if you want to learn more about how to generally animate something in Flutter, not just transitions of routes, check out the video from the card in the corner. To go through this tutorial at your own pace and to get all of the code, check out the written tutorial available from the link in the description. And also go to flutter.education, links also in the description, to get the top curated Flutter news and resources aimed at improving your app development career. I really select the best Flutter news and resources, and you can also get them delivered right into your inbox when you sign up to my mailing list. In this tutorial, you'll learn about Sailor, which is the next step when you are just fed up with manual handling of navigation through named routes. It supports nice mechanisms of passing data around, and in addition to that, Sailor also simplifies applying route animation transitions, as you could see right now. So if you do not want to miss more tutorials like this, definitely subscribe to this channel and also join the notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ResoCoder, I am determined to provide you with the best app development tutorials and resources out there. If this video helped you with understanding Sailor and how to navigate better in Flutter, give it a like and also share it with our developers who will surely benefit from it too. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, any suggestions for future tutorials or questions, and see you in the next video.